So welcome to season 2, episode 1 of They Think It's All Sober. And today's guest is our wonderful, beautiful, kind, but slightly poorly, I'm afraid, sober psychotherapist, Mr. David Gibbs.
Hello.
Welcome.
Guys, you've leveled up.
We have.
You have
We've done the thing
up.
the Tories promised to do, but never did. We have leveled up.
I love it.
It's good, isn't it?
It's good. It's intimidating. It's real. There's cameras. There's lights. Yeah.
Go on, give us 3 words to sum up when you walked in and saw the new They Think It's All Sober studio.
Impressed. Slightly nervous. And excited.
Great.
Nervous because you're up on the hot seat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I normally come in at the end, right?
Yeah.
You know, I just add my little bit. But now we're going to talk a little bit too much about me. Especially with your little reference previously about the pop star thing, which I was not going to talk about.
And I had no idea about, so we're going to have to now.
We're going to have to definitely delve into that. And I don't think many people would know.
No, I keep it, I hide it. Yeah.
I will be revealing all of the members as well and personally calling them out. Because they're all very, very good friends of ours.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Amazing.
And they try and keep it under the radar as well, don't they?
No, but to be fair, I keep my former band roots very firmly hidden as well.
So you got secrets as well?
We've all got secrets, David. That's why we're sat here on a sobriety podcast. I think that's half the problem. But no. So should we kick off with our normal question, Tom?
So yeah, let's take it back. We're here to hear your story, your journey with alcohol, your relationship. At what point there was a tipping point which made you stop? But we always take it back, don't we?
We do.
So let's hit it. Time machine.
Will you?
Oh, it's very good.
Yeah,
it's
man.
very
I've been
good.
practicing those 3 weeks.
I'm so glad it's on camera now. as well.
yeah. That fucking hell. Yeah, people literally like.
I'm gonna compile those over all the weeks.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Oh, it's gonna be good. So yeah, let's go back. So I suppose it's just good for everyone to get an understanding of what the relationship was like with alcohol, perhaps when you were growing up around family and friends, and you know how normal or not normal it was. So what were your sort of first memories of alcohol being a thing?
You know, alcohol was never a thing in my family. It wasn't something, like my dad had a drink, my mum would drink very rarely, but it wasn't something that had a major focus. But for me, I found alcohol, maybe let's say 12, and immediately it changed everything. So it wasn't influenced by friends, it wasn't influenced by families, it was influenced by the fact that when I took a drink, something happened, and it was profound. And from that moment, it was a really intense relationship right up until I got sober.
Interesting. So 12 years old. It's quite young, even by, I suppose, by early drinking standards.
Yeah.
So what happened at 12? What was your first experience with it, if you don't mind sharing?
So I will share it, but let me give you a little bit beforehand, because I think it then kind of makes sense of drink. So growing up, intensely sensitive as a kid, right? Like I didn't manage life well.
Yeah.
So at the age of 12, I was really struggling. I was anxious, I was depressed, a lot of suicidal ideation, just really unable to cope with life on life's terms. So then I found a drink. I think it was like do you remember the little beers? Like Dad seemed to have them a lot.
The stubbies.
Right.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone about this the other day. Like, I remember all of my friends' dads having these like French tiny beers. Where the fuck did they get them from?
Where are they now?
Where are they now? Aldi or Lidl?
Yeah. So that was the first. So I'm this kid, right, that's very sensitive, like in a lot of trouble. Like you'd walk into my room, right, there was like holes in the wall from fists. There was a lot of shit written. It was just, you could tell I was struggling.
Right.
I took that drink and suddenly all of that tension and pressure and struggle was lifted. So it wasn't this kind of gradual sense of, I kind of like drinking, I like partying, and it's got a bit too far. For me, it was like, fuck, I found what I need to cope with life.
Wow.
And from that point, it was my medicine. You know,
Yeah.
my life got so much better when I found alcohol to begin with.
Wow.
You know, 12, you know, angry, depressed, anxious, 15, popular, confident, living life.
Interesting.
It immediately became this thing that helped me.
So for you, I mean, we've talked about it a lot, the good, the bad, the ugly of alcohol. And I suppose from what you're saying, there was never even a healthy relationship from the get-go.
No.
It was very much like, hey, this is medicine.
It was the solution to the problem of living. You know, it calmed that thing in me that then allowed me to go out and face the world. So it was a productive tool for the first few years. Like, I was a better person because of it. But obviously we know what it gives us at the beginning, it takes away, and it did that. But.
So that first time you found that beer, was that just like in the house? Did someone offer it to you? Like, what was the thought process? Because as a 12-year-old, I find it interesting that you'd think to have a drink, because I think I was still throwing Action Men out the window of my flat.
Still doing that now, Jamie.
Doing that now, just with me.
I have a vague memory of it. I think I was sat in like where my dad's office was. Maybe I was on MSN, maybe I was on something, maybe I was doing something and I found it.
Right.
And I had one of those little bottles, and then I had another one.
Right.
And then I had another one. And then I had another
That's
one.
what I was going to ask. Like, was it one and you instantly felt it, or was it like one feel a little, like, what was the gateway? Was there like a tipping point of which you were like, fuck me, this is really helping? And what did it quieten? Just all of the negative ideations that were inside you?
So I think it must have done something, because I continued. You know, that night I continued beer after beer, but it quieted the chaos that was going on for me, the intensity. Like, straight away I realized, oh, you know, life is really hard. My head is spinning. There's so much fear, there's so much anxiety, and if I take this drink, suddenly that lessens.
Yeah.
And then I kind of feel this sense of calm, and then I kind of can think a bit straighter and imagine possibilities and hope. It really did kind of bring me to a place where I could actually think in a clearer way.
Yeah. That's so fascinating, and I'm so glad you're sharing this, because I think this is so unlike anything or anyone we've spoken to previously. Yeah. How did that then manifest, I guess, over the next couple of years? Because did it then feel like something you went to regularly, like say after that first weekend, and then you went to school on the Monday? Like, how did that relationship then grow?
So I think immediately it was on my mind. Was it that I was daily drinking? No, you know, I couldn't get hold of it, but it was there. I knew about it. I was aware of its presence, and I was always looking for an opportunity. And then we obviously moved into the 13, 14, 15 area where we do drink a lot more.
Yeah.
And I did the typical parties and the kind of drinking in parks, which is like a rite of passage, right? And I did the fun drinking, but I always knew, for me, it was more than just fun. I always knew what it was giving me.
Right.
Interesting. So you did have, I guess, prior to what I just said, there was a period of time where I guess everyone else was suddenly doing it around you, sort of early teens, where perhaps it was fun.
Yeah, and the way I'm talking about it makes it sound so serious, and it may make it sound like it wasn't fun. It was fun. You know, it was incredible. I had loads of good memories with drink. I guess the point I'm saying is, straight away I knew how important it was to me. Right. I knew how vital it was to me. I liked myself better when I was drunk. I heard someone say something a while ago. Normally people have a few drinks and they lose control, or they feel out of control. With me, it was a few drinks and I felt finally in control of myself.
Right.
Interesting. You know, it brought me to a sense of, cool, I'm good, I can do this now. And now looking back, I know that wasn't normal. You know, I know that way of seeing alcohol was different to the people around me. That's interesting, because the way you're describing alcohol is the way that most people would probably describe cocaine.
I was literally about to say the same thing.
Like, because I suppose most people would go through that drinking thing, and I don't think it's ever given most people that sense of control. It's been the other way. And then the coke has been for a lot of people that struggle with, you know, confidence and, you know, being able to go into a room of people and actually going to have a conversation with someone you've never met before.
Yeah, the function.
That would be what coke is. So it's interesting that, I guess scientifically is probably something that can explain it, but you were getting that, you know, from the age of 12, 13 from alcohol.
Yeah.
So I guess it probably leans towards dependency probably quite a lot from an early age, you know, going, hey, this is something that makes me feel better. So why the fuck wouldn't I be doing it all the time?
Of course, yeah. You know, and kind of from a nervous system point of view, we know it has that calming effect. And if I was chronically overwhelmed, right, and dysregulated, to find something that even if it did it in kind of a less than ideal way, suddenly my body calmed enough that I could think straight.
Yeah.
Suddenly my thoughts weren't racing as much. And so that's why I say I'm in control, because it's like, it gives me a bit of clarity. I can think. I can speak to someone without that kind of internal narrative of kind of criticism or judgment or fear.
Very interesting. I guess I'm trying to want to keep on the timeline, and given the sort of grand intro that I did of yours when I touched on the word pop star.
Yes.
So your journey into music, I'd imagine, was probably around that sort of time. Is that right?
Yeah. We were signed at 15.
15.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe, I don't know, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about the story. Don't look at me like that. Yeah. He's like, fuck you. I think it's important for the journey of, I suppose, alcohol and then what it brought to the table.
Yeah, for sure. So, 15, I think we were signed, and my life changed dramatically because we were suddenly in different cities all the time, different countries. And alcohol, you know, my life changed in the way that you'd imagine. We were away from our parents, and it was for a few years. To say we got to the 18-year-old stage, we were out all the time, we were partying, we were having fun, and you could get away with it because you had this identity as someone that wasn't doing the typical thing that a 17 or 18-year-old was doing. But I knew even then that there was a difference.
Yeah.
And I think about it this way. The people in the band were all heavy drinkers, all heavy drug takers. But I remember one day we came downstairs after a night out, we'd slept for a few hours, and they were having breakfast, and they were laughing and they were joking. And they were talking about the night before, and I couldn't understand how they could just get back to reality. I couldn't understand how they could accept that the party was over.
Interesting.
Because for me, it was like, no, it can't be. It can't be over. They loved getting drunk. I hated being sober. That's the difference. Right. That's that, and that is a big difference because it means that I can't cope with life when I'm not drunk. So what do you mean we have to go back to this other existence? I just wanted it to continue. So the band days were amazing. They were so much fun. But they enabled my drinking because there was nothing wrong with grabbing a bottle of brandy and taking it into the van. Like, it could be romanticized.
I guess just to touch on that. So you're 15 and you sign, you know, you're in a band, you get signed to a big label deal. 3 years ago, you were a 12-year-old who didn't leave his room and was angry and was upset. Would you say that the drink helped that confidence to enable you to become the person who could be in a band and get signed?
For sure. And that's what I'm saying. Like, alcohol gave me everything I needed to be able to go out to the world, to perform, to be confident, to do interviews. But kind of to move to the future very quickly, it also completely fucked me up because I never learned what it was like to deal with difficulty, to deal with big emotions, to deal with anxiety sober. I kind of sidestepped it.
Yeah, so I guess essentially since being a child, that had been your go-to.
Yeah. You know, sometimes in like 12-step fellowships, they talk about like you're the age, when you get sober, you're the age when you started drinking. Because from the moment you started drinking, you didn't learn how to regulate your emotions or how to deal with people. You just use alcohol. So you have to do this whole process again. And yeah, for sure, it was a really positive thing. And I don't know if I would have gone down that route without alcohol. I don't think I would have managed it. It kept me safe. and it made, or at least created, this illusion of confidence. But that was also a damaging thing, because you always knew you weren't really confident.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I probably actually knew you least out of all of the guys that are in your band. I was, I suppose, friends probably with Jack and Dave May. And
You just outed them all, Tom.
Yeah, good.
You've outed
If I'm
them
outed,
all.
they're outed.
don't leave out Robbie McDay. But no, I mean, I probably knew you the least, but we were like, it's really weird though, because we were from the same place, doing the same thing in very different spectrums. I was doing the crazy metal shit, and I was very much like one of the insane kids in Reading.
Yeah, I remember that haircut.
And hey, don't diss the haircut. I'm gonna bring it back. And you guys were on a very similar path, and I used to give Guppy a lot of shit because you guys were a pop band.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was such a rockist. For lack of a better word, anything that I was so disparaging of anything that wasn't technical or heavy or anything else. And I mean, fucking take a look at me now. Like, if I'd have asked me then what I'd do now,
I would be so disappointed.
you could have come up to me and been like, mate, you might laugh at me now, but in 12 years' time, you're going to be the fucking Weller man.
You're gonna write a sea shanty, you prick.
Yeah, but I remember, but sometimes we used to be out at the same time, and I can't remember like specifically partying with you, but like sometimes it did happen, and it was the same level of chaos. I remember thinking, oh, these pop guys do like to party after all, and that was what was going through my head at the time. Like we
That's
did,
mad.
and we were in Purple Turtle and just like constantly these events. But you guys just had, nicer clothes and looked much prettier.
Can I ask about kind of the enabling culture that you were surrounded by? Because I guess we'll touch on drink, if you don't mind, maybe touching on drugs as well. Like, obviously you were signed as children, and I'm assuming there was a team around you that were there to protect you, but was it very much like the unspoken thing of just like, you did just go on and do what you did as you became 16, 17, 18, and was it just accepted? And then I guess the word is enabled that, like, do you want anything? Or was it where did the drink turn into everything else?
It wasn't encouraged, but it was known, for sure. And I think that's really damaging. Like, the work that I do now as a therapist in the music industry is as a direct result of that, of understanding that these kids are getting signed with no support, with no guidance, and they're getting wrapped up into a world where it becomes overwhelming and they go down very fast. I wish I had someone at that age, instead of just letting it go or letting it be, to say, hey, something's not right here. Like, I do remember we had a tour manager, incredible guy, ex-Hells Angels, like, I don't know if you met him. But he was the only one to ever call it out, and he said to a bandmate, just be careful with David, because I don't like how he's drinking.
So he could see it.
He could see it. And I really thank him for that, because that began some conversations. And I think he could see something different, because he could see we were all drinking, drugging heavily. But there was something about the way that I took alcohol around with me that I think he saw was different.
Right.
But he was the only person ever to mention that. I think a lot of the time it was just an unspoken given.
So if you speak about, like, you said you were sat around the breakfast table and you hated the being sober, would you then find yourself, like, the soonest opportunity you could in the morning to have a drink? Like, did it get to the point where, do you mind talking about kind of like the habits of your drinking at that point?
For daily drinking, it didn't actually happen until later.
Right.
What it would be was that I would wait until I'd performed sometimes before I had a drink.
Right.
But the really sad thing about that, as I look back, is that, like, we weren't a massive band. We didn't end up making it fully, but we played some really big shows. So say, we'd be going out in front of 10, 20,000 people. And that experience was nothing to me compared to the drink that I'd have afterwards.
So you'd almost, like, that half an hour.
Can't wait to get the brandy in the van on the way back. And that's so sad that alcohol can have that much power. So what I would do is we'd have a couple of hours sleep. I'd white knuckle it until we performed. And then I'd drink again. You
Wow.
know? And sometimes it would be chaotic in clubs, but sometimes it would just be, especially within like the music industry, we can romanticize alcoholism, we can romanticize this kind of hectic lifestyle. And yeah, there was times of that, but actually some of it was just really sad.
Yeah.
You know, it was just me disappearing into myself with a bottle after just doing something that so many people would have loved.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten, or I'd lost touch with that love because it didn't touch on the comfort I'd get from that bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the first person and you won't be the last who is a performer that does that. I mean, Rob said the same thing, didn't he? Rob Harvey said, you know, he's going on with like the music or the streets and playing a show at like a sold out event, and all he could think of was, I can't wait for this to finish so I can get on it. I've been there as well.
Yeah.
You know, I've been there because we used to have like 2 or 3 beer like max rule, especially doing the shit that we did, because if I was like inebriated, there's no way I could play it. It was impossible. But it was the same thought process. You know, you used to think, shit, I can't wait till the party afterwards. This is going to be sick. We're going to have a great night. And you're there and people have paid like money to come and see you, and you're there doing something and you just can't wait to go and get fucked up. And hindsight's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Because you look back and you kind of say, I wish I'd taken more of those moments in without thinking about drink or drugs.
Yeah.
And you know, couldn't. But
I struggle with that massively. Like, so much of my 20s was spent waiting for things that I probably should have loved, whether that was work, family, whatever, to finish so I could go somewhere and do something that I probably actually wouldn't have enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, take it out of the context of music or the industry we're in. This is the same thing when someone exists during the week to get to the pub on Friday. Now, that's not a judgment. It's just to say it's interesting, right? That you miss out these moments of joy of being with your kid or a conversation with your partner because your life is kind of focused in on these moments of release.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in different ways have that sense of living.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's interesting, isn't it, about the way in which, I suppose, I don't want to say addiction cycles, but I suppose it's some form of dependency, because you're right. I suppose a lot of normal working people working very normal jobs is part of a routine, is getting through to Thursday night or Friday and going out and having a drink.
Mate, I used to be buzzing to have a bag. Like my mates would be like, "Oh, it's fucking nearly time for a bag." Like when you get to a Thursday or Friday, it's shocking.
True. But you talk about white knuckling it for a day, but I don't think normal people are doing anything different by white knuckling it through Monday to Thursday, going, I haven't got shit face, but now I've got to the end of the week, I can go and get fucked up and it's fine, and then I can be hungover at the weekend, and you're still in like a cycle where it's having an impact, probably a negative impact in the grand scheme of things on your life. And again, said it earlier, I don't want to be coming from a place of judgment, because people can go out and enjoy alcohol and enjoy having a drink. There's people that do it really well and can balance it. I mean, my fiance is an example of someone that has a really healthy relationship with drink. You know, drinks maybe, I'd say 3-4 times a year, and, you know, has a few glasses and gets a bit tipsy, and that's it. I'm like, I wish I could be you. But yeah, there's all these different cycles, isn't it? For some people, it's like the daily thing. For some people, it's weekly. Other people, it might just be like events where they go, cool, this event's coming up in 2 weeks, I'll ride it out till then and go and get slammed. And
and this is why in previous episodes I've always kind of asked the audience, not as a judgment to say, hey, the way you drink is wrong, but just become curious. Like, what is your drinking pattern? What is your priorities in life? What are you getting from drink, and what are you missing out on because of it? Because we very rarely reflect until sometimes it gets disastrous. And I think sometimes it can be really helpful just to make these adjustments, even if we're not deciding to go sober.
Speaking of disastrous,
mate, you can tell we did this for a while, because that was my exact line. That was my segue in back to David. So you can tell that we've been seasoned pros.
There we go. So speaking of disastrous, where did it get too much for you? So you're doing the band, you're playing arena tours with some very well-known people, you're doing some big festivals, you're drinking a lot to excess, drugs are a big thing that's going on. Talk us through the kind of the run up until the point where you were like, that's enough. Like, what was going on?
So I left the band, moved back to my parents' house.
Yep.
Was in their back room, continued drinking. And I would have continued drinking if alcohol continued to do what it did. But there was at some point where I knew that I was drinking to try and get rid of the kind of fear. And I couldn't stand up, but my head wasn't, it was still just as intense. The storm was just as intense as it always had been. And it was this really scary place of thinking, my medicine isn't working. And it's at that point that I started going to kind of counselors, and I started going to kind of alcohol centers. But I still wasn't ready to give up. I then set up this, because I've always worked, so I set up this digital agency. We had, I don't know if you ever went there, but we had this house, like 5-bedroom house with managers and producers. It was a crazy party house.
I remember it well.
And around that time, I was just thinking, I can't drink enough for all this pain to go. It was like I was back to being that 12-year-old.
Yeah.
All of that was back again.
Wow.
And I was creative in my attempts to mix drink with this or that or exercise or drugs, and nothing was doing it. It was such a terrifying place to be when you're like, I can't drown out the noise anymore. And it wasn't fun. People were in the house. It was a party house. It wasn't fun for me anymore.
No.
And I knew that I had to find a way to wake up and not want to kill myself or not want to or not need to take a drink. Like, I remember so many times going into the bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, you don't want to drink. Like, my stomach was burning and I drink. I remember clearly having like a bottle in my hand, but like, you don't want to do this. Like, it hurts to do this right now.
Yeah.
And time again, there I was, you know, and that is a really horrible place to be.
Of course. And I remember that. I remember the house because I suppose it was almost like a reincarnation of like Xenomania in a way, where there were a lot of like creatives just put in this bubble.
Yeah.
But a lot of the creatives had their struggles as well.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say, with drink and drugs. And I don't know, for someone like yourself, being in that environment probably normalized it maybe more than they should. Felt more acceptable to have a drink and do a line or whatever it may be.
Of course,
So it's, I mean, I remember that house well. And I suppose even in my times of drink and drugs, I was like, fuck me, this is pretty heavy. I remember being there going, shit, I mean, could go there for a party, that's for sure.
And you lived that, like, it was a mad place to live. And it was fun. Yeah. But there was a lot of, like, for me personally, a lot of darkness in there because it was so out of control.
Of course. So would you say you quitting the band was due to the excess of drink and drugs, or had it kind of run its course?
Drink and drugs played a part in the relationships in the band, but no, it run its course. Yeah. And I was, you know, through all of this, I've always been really driven in work. So there was just new things I wanted to do, new things I wanted to try.
Yeah, of course.
You know, if I wasn't drinking, I was working. You know, that was like a good, or in the end, they were both happening together. But I always had that sense of I can work. You know, I can distract myself in that way.
So I remember properly getting to know you at, I would say, probably the very end of your chaos and probably your very early days of sobriety, because of the company and, you know, doing a lot of like social media stuff, which some of it we did together. Yeah. And that's when I kind of got to know you. And I remember at the time being like, wow, this is pretty mad. This geezer doesn't drink anymore. Yeah. I was like impressed. I was like, fair play, because I was like just kind of getting my like steam train going in the carnage. And
this guy's like, I'm a decade deep.
Yeah. And so yeah, I guess maybe let's go to the point where you did stop and where it got you were like, I'm out. When was it? What happened? Did you have a rock bottom?
No. No. Weirdly, the day I stopped, the night before, I'd only had 6-7 pints. It was a really light one, but I think I'd just come to the end of it. Like, as I said, I couldn't outrun all the thoughts in my head. It wasn't working. And something just told me this was it. I was 22. I was living in the house. I didn't know how I was going to get sober. I didn't know what life was going to be like sober, but I knew I had to. And this is the part of the story that was really exciting, because that journey into sobriety was just amazing. Crazy, but amazing.
Let's talk through it.
Yeah,
Let's go. This is what we're here for. This is the big shit.
Listen in. Right, okay. So I remember Sunday morning waking up, feeling shit as I always did, and putting a hoodie on, lighting a cigarette, and walking to a meeting in Reading. I don't know how I'd heard there were meetings. I never really remember, but something took me there. And I didn't know what I was expecting, but I walked in and it was overwhelming, but there was hope there. Part of me still didn't know how I was going to get sober, but there was another part that thought, no, I'm going to though. Something about coming into a room where people were connecting. They were talking about the stuff that was in my head. I'd never heard anyone talk about it. I'd go to alcohol people, I'd go to counselors, and it was like we were speaking a different language.
Right.
You know, controlled drinking really works for some people. Mm-hmm. If you tell me to control my drink, you don't understand my problem. It's as simple as that. Like, I can't fucking control my drink. What are you on about?
Yeah.
Like, as if I have the ability to drink a bottle of wine and then stop. Like, that's just ludicrous. These people were speaking differently. And in this kind of, I see sometimes alcoholism as like a disease of disconnection, right? And I was so separated. And I went into this room and suddenly I felt not alone anymore. There was this sense of belonging.
Amazing.
In the most peculiar selection of people I've ever seen. But it was amazing. And I went back that day to the house and was like, well, I'm not drinking anymore.
And you were in this house of chaos.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing, actually, because the bravery to A, take yourself to the meeting, and then B, I know, because I lived in a very similar house, go back to that house where it is just pure fucking hedonism and chaos.
Yeah.
And have the strength to say, I'm out.
Yeah.
It's pretty fucking admirable.
And those first few months, man, I'd walk down the stairs, people would be passed out, like the party would still be going on, you know, people would come around the corner like zombies, like, and I'd navigate myself through it. And off I'd go to a meeting, you know.
Did you feel pride in yourself early on? Like, did you navigate that scenario? Because I'm assuming at the worst point, it took you back to that 12-year-old self with all the self-hatred and doubt. Was there ever a point in the sobriety where you felt like that 12-year-old kid again, or did you instantly feel like, oh no, this is my path now?
I felt like that 12-year-old kid, and maybe I did for the first year because I had to learn how to regulate my emotions again. Yeah. But something was happening in that first year. There's a saying in 12-step fellowships, which is, we'll love you until you learn to love yourself. So we'll love you until you learn to love yourself. And that's what happened in the first year. You know, I brought to these people all my pain and all my insecurities and all my fear, and I just kept receiving love and understanding. So it wasn't like an instant, oh, I'm really proud of myself. It was like, I'm more vulnerable than I've ever fucking been in my life. I have no defense. And I'm walking into this house that I live in where it surrounds me, but something that I was getting from this journey of sobriety was more powerful than that. Wow. And I so remember, I remember even in the early days, a friend's birthday, and I drove them all to the club, and I dropped them off. I went back, called a couple of guys from the meetings, had a chat. There was just this freedom. Yeah. You know, I thought, and maybe I've said this before, that I was free because I drank. I thought, fuck the rules. Like, I was so chained to that shit. So this ability to choose not to drink, to have a choice for the first time in my life, was just remarkable.
Man, do you know what? That something you said there just really resonated with me, and I don't think I've really clocked it in my own life until you've just said it, which is that freedom of like leaving the party and getting in your car and driving home at like 10 p.m. Yeah. You've just made me realize that feeling I feel at that point is liberation. Yeah. It's the most liberating thing when you're like, I'm actually free of all of the things that used to tie me down there, which is probably guilt, self-hatred, pushing onto a night you didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And you get in that car and you're so liberated because you're like, I'm going home now.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's such an incredible feeling, and it's interesting, isn't it? So you were 22 years old when you did that, and like I said, I know that the house that you were living in, but what I would say as well is that it's very powerful when you make that decision, isn't it? And you're surrounded by it. Because I did it many years later than you did. I went, how old would I have been? 33, 34 when I stopped. But then being surrounded in it still, in the chaos, there's something quite powerful knowing that you're not doing it.
Yeah.
And even if it's surrounding your entire life and the people around you are still involved in the chaos, to be able to kind of walk through it and go, I did it probably through like the toughest conditions possible and did it, probably sets you up pretty well. I would have thought. Yeah. That was your test, right? Living in that house where drink, drugs, parties were still going on, and you were in day 1, week 1, month 1, month 3, month 6. Did it come with any challenges, or were you just on the mission?
I was on the mission. The challenges were emotional because I'd never learned how to deal with my emotions. So I'd be crying and screaming and shouting and anxious. Once I decided to stop drinking, that was that. But to live life without a drink is a very different thing, right? I had to learn everything again.
Yeah.
I had to learn how to look someone in the eye. Mm-hmm. I had to learn how to have a conversation with the people that I loved because I didn't know how to do that without alcohol.
Yeah.
I had to learn how to work. But each step took me to this place of confidence. And we spoke at the beginning about how alcohol gave me that confidence. It was a fake confidence. I knew it deep down somewhere that it wasn't real. That first year of sobriety was the first time I felt truly confident.
Amazing.
Because I learned to do something fully, authentically. And that's why that first year, although it was chaotic, it was one of the best years of my life.
Yeah. Mate, it's just so beautifully inspiring because I think hearing that 10-year journey from the depths of, and I never knew that, I never knew how much of a pained and I guess tortured child you were emotionally internally. So to go through that journey and then have to rebuild essentially from the ground up and relearn is fair fucking play because it's so admirable.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. And it's, especially in the environment that you're in, to go and do it. And what I want to touch on as well, and I think this is probably a common theme for most people and why a lot of people drink that you're talking about, is confidence, right?
Yeah.
I think it's probably what 90% of people feel that alcohol gives them to then go and be sociable or to walk into a club or a pub or a bar or go for work drinks or a work dinner or go and meet, your partner's family, new family or something. I think for a lot of people doing that, going, I'll have a couple of beers before. And I bloody did it before I proposed to Sarah. I was in the Lake District and I was so fucking nervous. I ended up gunning about...
Pass me the cat.
Yeah, I was like... I think I gunned about 5 tequilas before because I was so nervous. Then went and knelt in sheep shit by a tarn in the Lake District. But confidence, and I think... But it's false confidence, right?
Yeah.
If it's repeated.
And what sobriety offers is for us to get in touch with a deeper, true level of confidence, which is incredible. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, and I don't know if this resonates with you, to be actually, I'm not that confident in that area. Actually, I don't really like social situations where they're really busy. I didn't have that choice. I thought I had to.
Yeah.
And so I'd have to drink and then be that guy that could do that. Now I'm more than 10 people in a room, it's not my cup of tea.
Yeah, probably won't do it.
Yeah, and that's okay. Yeah. There's a confidence that comes again. That's not my thing.
100%. That's the big thing. Anyone listening that knows me would know me as the guy that would handle any amount of people in any scenario and be the guy.
Yeah.
And I think now I can still be if I need to be professionally, but when it comes to my personal life, I went to Blink-182 the other night and I knew about 50 people there. And I was sat in the bar kind of outside and there was a glass window and I kept seeing all these people I knew go past and I started to feel really anxious, and the person I was with was like, "Are you all right?" I was like, "Yeah," because it's bringing back a lot, because in old money I would have gone into that bar and I would have met everyone and I would have been absolute chaos and I would have led it, and now all I want to do is sit with you and talk to you, just you and I, and have this really nice night on our own.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling this thing where I feel like I have to be this other person. It's the first time since I've gone sober, and it wasn't because It wasn't because I wanted to drink. I actually hated the thought of going back to being that person.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but it just comes with the territory of actually getting to know yourself a bit better, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just like, I'm going to get my Bud Zero. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to talk to you one-on-one. And if anyone comes over and wants a conversation, I'll say, hey, how are you? Hope you're good.
Yeah.
But I'm,
And that point of getting to know who we are, that is for me the blessing of sobriety. Like, I had no fucking clue who I was when I was drinking. And I remember calling someone up, like early sobriety, and being like, what the fuck do I do on a Saturday morning? I had this whole identity tied in with this chaos. I'm like, who am I? What do I actually like musically, as a hobby? Everything was unanswered.
Yeah.
I had just completely identified with this person I thought you wanted me to be. And then I had to drink continuously to sustain that persona. And for me to be able to enjoy this process of, okay, what do I like? What do I not like? Who do I want to be? How do I want to be in the world? That's why drinking isn't, or stopping drinking or sobriety is not just about giving up the drink. It unlocks this whole kind of growth process.
Yeah.
If we want it to.
100%. And it gives you more time to figure it out as well, doesn't it? Like all the time that it gives you to be able to go and try, like you say, like what are my hobbies? What music do I like? I mean, fuck me, the last like 19, 20 months, I've actually had time to do those things again. And, it transpires that actually I quite enjoy spending lots of time in like the Lake District and going hiking and doing all this shit, which before, one, I wasn't fit enough to get up a fucking mountain. I was like gassing like quarter of the way up something. And, but you do. And it's a beautiful thing. And I'm sure not all of it's easy, is it? Like getting to, like you say, going back to essentially being like your 12-year-old self and figuring all the stuff out comes with its challenges. It's not just a walk in the park, is it? But one that's immensely rewarding, right?
Yeah. Well, the way I see it is I spent 22 years of my life escaping and running from pain.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that first year of sobriety was confronting that pain head on. And that was really fucking painful.
Yeah.
But when we confront our pain, we transcend it, we become something more. It's this kind of alchemy.
Yeah.
And so many of us, sober, not sober, that's how we live our lives. We escape and run from and avoid pain and never realize. There's this phrase that I love. It's like, it's this idea of kind of we awaken to life not despite our difficulties, but because of them. It's this idea of there's this magic in like getting to know who we are, even the really difficult parts, facing up to what we find hard, becoming something new. I'm not sure if you can do that when you're drinking in a problematic way.
No, I agree.
Think about it really simply. Why are we drinking? What are we running from?
Mm-hmm.
If it gets to that level, what is it that we're unwilling to deal with?
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing, man. And like, I think let's try and touch, I guess, on a little bit of because you've been sober a fucking long time now. It's been what, 13?
He's not that old.
No, not that old. No, coming up 10 years.
Wow. Okay, so 10 years. So it's a long time in the grand scheme of, you are the Yoda we talk about.
Yeah, he is.
You're there, and you've got a beautiful family.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my big not incentives, but I suppose it's part of the accountability thing, but I've loved sobriety for my fatherhood and trying to be the best I can be. And I guess let's maybe talk through now your journey and all the wonderful work you do as a psychotherapist, and what made you want to kind of go into that and take the sort of journey that you have.
Yeah. Regarding kids, like I always think I could not look after myself, let alone another human being.
Yeah.
So the fact that I can be a present dad that is dependable, that is stable, that is sturdy, that's a fucking blessing of recovery.
Mm-hmm.
No way could I have been that person when I was drinking the way I was. No way I could be that person if I took a drink again. That's not everyone's experience, but for me, I know that.
Yeah.
And so my journey from the music industry and then into kind of psychotherapy is that I became obsessed with this idea that we can change. Mm-hmm. The transformation for me in those first few years of recovery was so intense, was so beautiful, that I was like, fuck, this is possible. People can actually transform. They can become something new. And at the same time, as I think I said earlier, I was witnessing real difficulties or lack of support in the music industry.
Yeah.
We had a couple of artists that were signed to majors at the time in the management company I ran, and I watched them kind of have a light or a spark in their eyes, and it just fade away because there was too much pressure and too much responsibility and no one taking accountability for these young people. So I became obsessed with firstly change, and also how can a supportive space help those entering into the music industry now. And so I went back to university, trained. I'm still training in different kind of approaches. And it's a blessing. It's like, it feels like what I was meant to do.
Yeah.
For sure. It's so rewarding.
And you're making a big difference, you know, and I think we should probably just also take a minute to address that, like all of us being in music. Artists, especially in the pop world, are treated like a disposable asset. And I think they're aware of it, aware of the pressures that it comes. Maybe not all of them fully understand. And like you say, they have a spark in their eye, and it's exciting doing your first deal, your first publishing deal, having your first hit record, you know, playing a festival. And then it becomes that reality, doesn't it? Of like, you might hit the post on your next single. Things might not go so well after 2 or 3. How the fuck do you navigate that after you've just had this huge success? And then that's where you come in, right? And you're going to try and help these people navigate these situations, navigate stresses, drink, drugs.
Yeah. And
all of it.
And my approach is not for them to, you know, sit down and I analyze them or I give them kind of coping tools. My approach is, let's just have a fucking conversation. Life is really tough sometimes. It's really complex. There's a lot of stresses. Let's just take a moment to wrestle with it all. What do we want? How do we feel? Where do we want to go? We don't get that opportunity a lot.
No.
You know, sit down with me as someone that has no personal attachment to your life, nothing to gain, because that A&R, that manager, you know, they're attached in some way. So just sit down, talk to me, like offload. Let's work out different ways to be in this experience that's going to be more fulfilling. And I fucking needed that as a kid. I think everyone needs it.
Yeah.
And especially in music, when there's such a shift from, you have this life where you maybe have a 9 to 5, or you're just left school, to suddenly being in a boardroom with 20 fucking adults talking about how the single's got to be, otherwise there's a potential of being dropped.
Yeah.
Like, you might.
How you need to be doing more on TikTok.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that pressure of like, we've invested X amount in you, and it's like, obviously I'm speaking from a managerial perspective, but even with some of my clients, I'm like, well, no one actually asked you to do that. You've made executive decisions, but that we didn't ask you to, and put the pressure on this young person's shoulders that they didn't need, which didn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
It could be very different.
It is. I mean, there's a shitload of pressure. I'm not saying other industries don't have it, but it's one that we all chose to get into, and one that pressure comes with the territory, you know. And I think you feel it from, as an artist, you feel it from all angles. There's a lot of people that are relying on you, and also their income.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you're the last to get paid.
Last to get paid, but you're making everyone else a fuckload of money.
Yeah.
And that's where the kind of pressure comes in. And, you know, you see that's why so many fucking artists derail, and you see it all the time, you know, go off and then start making, you know, headlines in the tabloids, and, you know, you go onto the news thing and you're like, oh, so-and-so's in rehab, and this person's here and this person's there. And you're like, maybe just having someone to talk to like you as like an industry standard would be a really, really good positive thing to have. And I hope it happens. Yeah,
I mean, that's the paradigm shift I'd like to see occur in the industry. But I mean, just more generally, we talked about it, therapy, right?
Yeah.
It's just so, for me, so important.
Yeah.
In a world that's so complex, in a world where we're all going to struggle, to have a space where we can just sit and talk and be heard and be witnessed. And I've said this before as well, but it's not about being broken and needing to be fixed. This is just about being human.
Yeah.
And hopefully with conversations like this and the vulnerability that you've shared and I've shared and the guests have shared, it opens a space
Yeah.
to just actually start being truthful to how we feel.
Yeah. I think that's something I love to, I wouldn't say, obviously, I know that everyone's financial circumstances are difficult, and I know that the NHS struggles with it massively in terms of getting people the right help, but I'd be really intrigued to know how many of our listeners are in therapy, because I think a lot of the messages that we get of people trying to stop drinking and know they're problematic, I'd probably go as far to say as 90% of them aren't in therapy or haven't had therapy, and I would love to encourage that for those that can, because it was a huge thing for me, even when I still drank. That process of acknowledging I needed to change. I didn't quite know that I needed to change the drink yet, but I knew that I needed to change something up here.
Yeah.
And when I started to make those steps and go and talk to my therapist, even after the first session, I remember ringing my ex-girlfriend being like, that's the best thing I've ever done. And I'd spent an hour out of my life.
Yeah.
And my life changed that day. It took me a while to get sober, but my life changed that day. And I'm sure you see it with people that you sit down with for the first time. Do you see the life come back into people's eyes? Like that ability to just fuck, someone's listening.
Yeah, I mean, so many of us don't get the opportunity to be heard and to actually reflect. You know, for me, what I prioritize in therapy is the relationship. I think there's something so valuable about building a true connection with someone, because I think so often in our lives we miss that, and there's something very healing about that. And yeah, the light coming back in someone's eyes, I see that in recovery, I see that in therapy, and that's what pushes me forward to know that that's possible, that we can make a difference, that, and maybe I'm speaking to someone listening, like, it actually doesn't matter how dark it feels right now. Like, from my experience, I've seen enough people that are right on the fucking edge of darkness. I was there, we've heard guests that have been there. It can get better when we begin to take those small steps forward, and that's a really hopeful perspective, and it's one that's grounded for me in truth.
Yeah.
And I get to witness it every fucking day. That's the beauty of my job.
Yeah.
I get to see someone come in and feel like there is no hope, and then 6 weeks later, 2 months later, 6 months later, the light is back in their eyes. They see potential again. They are able to tolerate the difficulty. They are moving forward. Like, it's such a gift.
That's beautiful.
That's amazing. And, you know, I think that's a testament really to anyone that's not done therapy that might have an opportunity to do so. Mm-hmm. I would urge you to do it.
Yeah. It's
changed my life. I know it's changed yours.
Oh, without a doubt.
And I mean, you're a fucking therapist, so you're out there and doing it and witnessing the change in people. And for me, it made a big difference to my life, and it's one that I make it one of my non-negotiables, in the same way that gym is one of them, because I know that if I do maybe more than 2 days without training or getting into a gym, I start to feel shit. And it's the same with therapy. If I go too long without just being able to sit around and just chat shit, which sometimes you don't really have too much to talk about, which is fine. Yeah. And sometimes you do. And
so, have you got any tips for running a podcast?
But just quickly on sobriety and therapy, I know that you started therapy before you got sober, and that helped you maybe move towards that place. But also, if you're getting sober or you're just at the beginning of that sobriety journey, therapy is perfect, because you've just taken away something that has helped you regulate, that has helped you kind of buffer yourself from the intensity of life. And now this is an opportunity to go in and actually face yourself and learn and move and grow. The two go hand in hand, I think, in a wonderful way.
Would you use the analogy of like sobriety or going sober, you're ripping off the plaster that the booze maybe gives you, and at that point your wound's probably the most open it's ever going to be. So there's the time to address that. And I would say that therapy for me was the best bandage to enable my brain to heal.
I think that's perfect. And the similar thing happens in 12-step programs, right? You get sober, but if you leave an alcoholic sober without a program, without the 12 steps as a route to transformation, they're fucked. Because all you've done is you've taken their solution away from them and you've left them with the raw intensity. There has to be, after sobriety, a change process. And that can come through therapy, that can come through a 12-step program. But yeah, if you left me in that first year of sobriety just with my feelings, and with no guidance, I don't know what would have happened.
That's fascinating, because you saying that made me think of a prisoner coming out of prison and just being left.
Yeah.
And so often there aren't rehabilitation programs for prisoners, hence they reoffend. And I guess if you link that, say, to alcohol or drugs, probably
without a program,
notion.
Yeah.
Or without something to focus on.
You know, you hit the bottom, you know.
Yeah.
Do you think it's time?
I think it might be time.
Time for the big three. And you probably forgot that this was
I forgot.
This happens every
and
time.
I can't
man.
remember the questions either. So
I'll kick it. I'll take the first two. I feel like it's Jamie established it firmly in season one
I didn't
that he
mean
wasn't
to
going to
do
have
it.
any other way.
It was just weird. I just started forgetting. The first two.
I know.
My short-term, I must say, I don't know whether it's like my drinking days, my drug days, or just the fact I have so much going on. My short-term memory is cooked sometimes. So when it comes to like remembering those two questions, I was like, I don't know. What's your favorite type of duck? Mallard, if you're asking.
Favorite cuisine.
Mallard.
So no, kicking off. What's the single best piece of advice you could give anyone who's thinking about changing their relationship with alcohol or sobriety?
I should have prepared the questions, Tom, because now I'm going to take ages to think about them.
That's fine.
The best advice I could give someone that's thinking of stopping, to try and understand this journey of sobriety as something that is not a process of giving up, but as beginning something new. To trust that, so often we've spoken about this, that it can feel like a loss, but I can guarantee them it's not, right? What they put down, they're going to gain tenfold.
Very good.
I love it.
Yeah, that's good. Second question. Number two.
I was just doing the sign. We're on video now, man. I've got to make these things more dramatic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. What's the single best thing about sobriety for you?
This is going to sound corny, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's freedom. The ability to choose the life I want, rather than be shackled to this idea of I've got to wake up and drink and repeat. It's freedom.
Freedom, baby. I love that. That's a great
we're going to get an American Eagle flying across the screen.
I hope so. That would be fucking cool.
We need to get some animation edits. And
Number
three. Yeah, the big one. So, could the sober psychotherapist, David Gibbs, please write a letter to 12 to 18-year-old David?
Drunk David, starting with Dear David, which I'm pretty sure is a horror film. Is Dear David in a horror movie? I think it is. Dear David.
Dear to the drunk 12 to 18-year-old David. Dear David, try not to be so afraid of the struggle. It always feels scary to confront difficulty and pain, but once you do, something changes and it transforms, and on the other side there's a life far better than the one that you're living now.
Beautiful.
The end.
That's amazing. Mate, thank you
Love it.
so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you for having me.
How did it feel being in the chair?
In the hot seat.
The first one. I've got to say, like, you are number one.
Yeah, less comfortable than when I come in at the end and just kind of reflect on other people's vulnerability, I'll be honest.
And also, you're going to fuck off and we're going to get to do that again about you. So, I've actually got another therapist coming in. You've been replaced. They're in the cupboard.
But it's an honor, and it's exciting to see where this podcast is going. I mean, so thank you for having me.
No, mate, look, you're such a vital cog in this machine, and it only felt right that we gave you the platform to tell your story, because it's just such a beautiful and fascinating one as well, because the fact that you've gone back and you've retrained, and I know how hard it is, because I've looked at it. I've really thought about doing psychotherapy, and I know how hard that is to commit to and do, and the time and the money and everything it costs. So the fact that you have dedicated your life to that, I think it's just such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, big on your bad self.
Yeah, so you'll all be hearing a lot more of David in this series as we navigate
Episodes to come, and he's joining us at Soho House.
You are.
I am indeed.
You are.
Bring it on.
Live and direct.
Integral part of our live show.
Yes, exactly. You got to dress them up. Just bring them out in an actual cupboard like a magician show. But no, mate, thank you so much. We appreciate it
Thank
very
you,
much. And looking forward to it.